Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Jim Morrison, and with us today, we have Joan Trice, CEO of Allterra Group, and Tom Winant and Dr. Alan Jeary of the STRAAM Group. We will be discussing structural risk and what the appraisal industry needs to know about it. Tom will be joining us in Florida on December 6th to speak at the upcoming Collateral Risk Network meeting. Joan, I'll hand it over to you and let you get started.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome, gentlemen. And boy, what a timely topic. I thought the Champlain Tower collapse was timely to have this discussion, but now we have a recent storm along coastal Florida, and I believe even hit South Carolina a little bit. Can you share with our appraisal audience what your company does and why you do what you do?
Thanks, Joan. Yeah, we at STRAAM, we measure the capacity of structures. And in light of what's happened with the Champlain Tower and what's happened now after Ian, we always have storms and earthquakes and things like that. But now the laws have changed. So there's a law in Florida that it now requires an assessment of structural integrity. Now Freddie and Fannie are looking at structural integrity as well. So I think we're at a paradigm shift in the industry as a whole. We have to understand we have an aging infrastructure and we need tools to figure out how it's aging, how it's degrading, and just make sure everybody's safe. Nobody in the Champlain Tower thought they would wake up and have a building on top of them, and nobody deserves to have that. So we have tools, there is technology, and now the laws are changing so that we can use them.
Fantastic. So Tom, tell us about what the impact of the Champlain Towers is on any lender or even the agencies in terms of collateral risk. I mean, this is a massive risk to the housing finance system.
Well, yes and no. It's alarming for sure. But the important thing that most people don't really realize, and Dr. Jeary spent his life figuring this out through building science, is that with all these structures out there, yes, they do age and they degrade over time. And shock events like wind events such as Ian or earthquakes will diminish the capacity. Most buildings are built with an understanding of a fundamental level of capacity, and the codes have changed to get to risk-based codes. But at the end of the day, based on the science that has been developed and the techniques of measuring structures and all of the database of the structures that have been measured, there are some that are weak. It's a little bit of a needle in a haystack. So there is reason for concern, and there is a need to assess these structures. But there shouldn't be a giant fear that we have all these buildings that are horrible. What we need to do is find those needles in the haystack like the Champlain Tower. And just to give some clarity on it, NIST is going to come out with a report as to what the mechanisms are of failure. And the mechanisms of failure for a structure can be numerous. At the end of the day, having a general understanding of its overall behavior and health is a really good thing to have. And through that process of objective measurements, you can probably pick out the needle in the haystack so that we identify those and they don't have a repeat of the Champlain Towers.
Dr. Jeary, let me ask you this question because I am not a scientist and there's lots of science behind what you do. Can you, in layman's terms, please help us understand what your process is?
Well, Joan, I can try. The basic process is that all structures are in motion all the time. Even though there are just very small forces acting on them, like a breath of wind or people moving past them, or even traffic in the street, then what happens is that the building moves, and physics constrains it to move in a certain way. It moves in that certain way at small amplitudes of response and at large amplitudes of response. So by measuring at the very small micro movements, we actually get a handle on what occurs at the very large amplitudes as well. We measure by using some devices, very, very sensitive devices that can resolve motion to better than the wavelength of visible light. Those are called accelerometers. and we transmit our data over the internet to an archive in California. And that way we can put everything up on the web for people to see within moments of what's happening. So after that point, after we've recorded the data, then what we have to do is decode them. And we have, and this is where it does, I have to admit, get a little bit complex. And what we do is decode the data, particularly the parameters that we're interested in. And there are two that are of most importance. The first is the frequency at which the structure sways backwards and forwards. The second is the damping. Now, of those, probably frequency is the more important to understand, because that's you rub your finger around a wine glass, for instance, and it rings. Well, if it's a good quality wine glass, it does anyway. But damping is more important to understand, because it actually represents the dissipation of energy by the entire structure. So if you measure that and you measure it in a nonlinear way, then what you have is this dissipation of energy that occurs in various different places through the structure. What causes dissipation of energy? Aging of a structure, cracks in the structure, big faults in a structure. All of these contribute to the damping. So damping is very much more difficult to measure, but the benefits of measuring are legion.
Fantastic answer. And I did understand most of what you said. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break for a commercial message and we'll be right back.
We've got some exciting product news from Cubicasa, the floor plan app. They've announced free floor plans are now available across the nation. The best part is it only takes 5 minutes at the property to complete a scan with no disto or measurement needed. In addition to the free version of floor plans now offered across the US, Cubicasa will also be making available ANSI-aligned digital GLA products for as low as $15 a scan. There's also expanded options to help you configure the product to best meet your needs. Cubicasa's GLA software can be used in all 50 states to generate ANSI-aligned floor plans with exterior measurements. To find out more or get your free scans, visit cubicasa.com.
Welcome back, everybody. So if I was able to follow the science, give me a little peek into actually what is the process? Is it like doing an EKG on a building? I mean, are you wiring it up with sensors to get a heartbeat, if you will, from the building's movement?
So interestingly, you brought that up because we actually trademarked the term structural cardiograph. So yeah, it's a.
No kidding. Okay, I didn't even know that.
I know, that was brilliant. And
I could be your marketing rep. Give me a call after. Yeah.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and very like how an EKG works and gets a signature on your heart and you track changes to that signature, we do the same on a building. And interestingly, just like they put electrodes at different parts of your body, we put sensors at different parts of the structure. And as Dr. Jeary talked about, we get these dynamic characteristics and they relate directly to what the codes are. And so now it gives you a finite picture of exactly what that structure is doing. Interestingly, we can take measurements at each apartment if you're talking about a high rise. Ideally, what we would love to have happen in the world is that when a building is built, they do an entire assessment of the entire building and commission it. It's a one-day test. It's not invasive and it yields very, very accurate measurements. But you could even take measurements in each apartment if you don't have access to the whole structure and get a snapshot picture of kind of where you fall into the bell curve of structures. So yeah, the structural cardiograph is really a great analogy, and it gets deployed very simply. Appraisers could get trained on using this. We have a 2-day training program. So they can get the equipment, it could be part of the assessment, and it would fit right into these, topic 56 changes that are coming about critical repairs. It would give some perspective on where a building fits in this bell curve and help us find these needles in the haystack that both Freddie doesn't want to put a mortgage on and that maybe pose a real risk to society. So that's the goal.
Well, and also impact value. So that's actually interesting. So you're saying that a untrained, you don't have to be a scientist to be able to use the machine and run the test.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's really powerful.
Well, and to give it a perspective, a nurse may not understand how the cardiograph machine works, but they
Right.
can put the electrodes on and you can get great. So the training process is about putting the sensors in the right place with an understanding of what could disrupt it. But all of the algorithms are up on the cloud. So the assessment takes place using these advanced algorithms, as Dr. Jeary alluded to. So you don't need to have an expert in the field. The expertise is written into the software and the codes, and it uses the advanced algorithms to yield a very rapid result. And the more actively it's used, the more efficient we're going to get. So it's a paradigm shift so that we can understand the risk of all these structures.
Fantastic. Let's do this, folks. We need to take one more break for a commercial message, and we will be right back.
The Appraisal Institute offers a wide array of affiliations, from the candidate for designation and practicing affiliate statuses to designated membership and student affiliation. Whether you're a lawyer, banker, assessor, graduate student, or a certified appraiser, the Appraisal Institute is the premier global professional association among a myriad of professionals either directly or indirectly connected to the appraisal industry. Become a member today or find out more at appraisalinstitute.org.
So, Tom, my understanding is there's hundreds of thousands of condo buildings in the United States, most in the coastal areas, but certainly not all. How scalable is this? That's a lot of buildings to inspect.
I think there's 10,000 in Florida alone, but they represent a decent
From
portion
little
of the
4-unit to anything from 20.
160,000 might be the right number. But and that's the whole point of this. With cloud computing and all this is very scalable. I was asked, so could you do them all? And the answer is yes, you can. We'd have to get an army of people trained, but you can take these measures. You could do several in one day with one set of equipment. So given the number of appraisers we have, it all goes up to the cloud. A lot of it's automated. So yeah, you could really get a handle on the greater population of structures in a couple years. And then we would have our own bell curve, and we would understand, who are the outliers. And then we could start making more intelligent decisions about what to do with these structures. But again, it's a huge minority, but that minority does a lot to undermine the confidence of our infrastructure. And we just got to get a handle on it. That's all. And this is a good way to do it.
Wow. Well, so Dr. Jeary, what inspired you to go down this path? I'm just fascinated with this, and I'm so impressed with the scalability of your technology, because I always get excited about new tech, but some of it I find so impractical. But this is scalable and it's impressive.
Oh, Joan, it has taken a long time. The thing that I'm working for is to make conditions better for humanity. That's always been my goal. I started off working in the UK with the generating board, and we were having structures blown down by strong winds. Later at the building research establishment, where we were involved with looking at the results of terrorism and trying to make sure that buildings were safer against very large forces. To that end, we actually built a vibrator system, and we shook 40 different structures. It's never been done before or after that time. It's a bit too expensive these days. So as a result, I contributed to codes of practice on 5 continents, talked to various researchers around the world, and together we've had over 1,000 buildings which have been investigated for their dynamic performance. And we've looked at using the techniques for risk analysis. Then we've looked at this bell curve that Tom talked about. And that bell curve tells us that the majority of buildings are actually okay, but there's a significant number which are below okay. On top of everything else, their capacity decreases with time. And yeah, I worked at one stage in Hong Kong. I was a chair professor in there. And one day, on a clear day, no wind, slightly sunny, a building fell down. It had been standing for 170 years, and it just decided that this was the end, fell down. Actually, somebody from my department was living in that building, but not in it at the time. So we developed gradually over time, developed the methodology for dissecting the data, getting closer and closer to being able to produce this risk ratio out of what they were actually doing, how they were actually behaving in the real world. And STRAAM was developed to do this. By a chance meeting in Hawaii, we formed the company, and the objective of it was to be able to identify exactly what the state of health of a structure was.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, this has been a fascinating discussion. I look forward to seeing you at the Collateral Risk Network meeting on December the 6th and discuss this more in depth. And thank you for your time today.
Thank
You're
you, Joan.
welcome.
Thank you so much, Joan, Alan, and Tom. That was a great discussion. I know there's going to be a lot more that appraisers want to hear about this topic. If you would like to hear more about this topic, Tom will be joining us in Sarasota for the Collateral Risk Network meeting on December 6th and be speaking there. Some of the other speakers we have are Bill Rayburn, Brian Montgomery, and we'll be finishing off the day with a valuation reform and modernization roundtable discussion led by Ed DeMarco, Joseph Tracy, and Joan Trice. So you're not going to want to miss that. Head on over to collateralrisknetwork.com and get registered for that event, and we look forward to seeing you there. We also want to thank our sponsors for helping us put this podcast together. We appreciate all the support from our listener community. If you have an idea for your future Buzzcast or would like to be interviewed, reach out to us at info@appraisalbuzz.com. Thanks and have a great day.